I would like first to thank Nebojša Nakicenović, I'm giving full names, Marcel van de Voorde, Elena Pikuta, and Richard Hua for accepting our invitation to talk in this webinar, which will be focused on production and use of biohydrogen. The event is the first one in a series organized by the World Academy of Art and Science and devoted to contributions of all sciences to sustainability and human security. The series is a part of the global campaign on human security for all, which was initiated by the United Nations Trust Fund for Human Security and WAAS, the Academy. It has been going on since January this year. In the first part of the event, the four speakers will present their materials they have prepared for this occasion. Upon that, we will have a discussion among the speakers. If the time allows, they will be able to answer the questions from the audience if they are put. Let us begin. I'm asking Nebojša Nakicenović to take the floor. Nebojša, please.
Yeah, thank you very much. Unfortunately, I was muted for a minute. So first of all, I would like to thank you, Nebojša, and the World Academy for the opportunity to participate in this webinar. And I will give a brief general introduction about the future energy sources, systems, I would say, and how they might be transformed in the future, and what the role would be of hydricity age. And you will see what I mean with this term a little bit later. So I prepared a couple of slides, and let me just start my presentation. For some reason, the slides are not advancing. Oh, there we go. Sorry, I'll go back. There we go. So arguably, I would say that the world is at the crossroads. I mean, we have experienced very explosive development over the last 2 centuries of industrial revolution, but many people are left behind. And we are right now, I would say, in global crisis, not just because of the war, the tragic war that's happening, but also we have just emerged out of the pandemic. So the challenges are huge. But I would also argue that the world has achieved a lot, and I have 3 bullets here. Since over the last 2 centuries, global economy increased 100 times, energy 50 times, and carbon dioxide emissions about 30 times. So you can see that we are using resources a little bit more efficiently. Unfortunately, not efficiently enough. So the emissions have exploded, and that has caused global climate change, about 1.3 degrees Celsius above the pre-industrial levels right now. And on top of it, about 8 million people die prematurely because of the indoor air pollution and regional air pollution, all a lot to do with the energy. So I would say that the achievement of the 2030 agenda of the UN with its 17 sustainable development goals and the Paris Agreement are a great gift to humanity, and they would bring multiple benefits for the people and the planet. And as I will say in a few minutes, I think hydrogen has a large role to play, and in particular, biohydrogen. Now, let me just go to the emissions. What you see here in the black curve shown on the left vertical axis are the global emissions growing at about 2% per year. We are close to 40 billion tons right now. This is a graphic from the Global Carbon Project that I had the honor of co-chairing for a number of years. And what I was alluding to is on the right scale is how much carbon is emitted per unit value added in the economy. And as you can see, this is declining, but it's not declining fast enough. And this is where I think the role of hydrogen would be in the future, to have a much more rapid decline toward the zero. I came to this topic, if I may start with a personal note, almost 30 years ago, pretty much 50 years ago, half a century ago, when I started working with Cesare Marchetti, who is, in my view, the father of the hydrogen economy. The first paper he published in 1973. And we started collecting data about this evolution, as you can see on the graphic. Again, I'm showing the carbon intensity of energy worldwide. And you can see that is declining. And why? It is declining because the world have shifted from carbon-intensive energy sources, such as traditional biomass, to coal, oil, gas, and now to renewable energies and nuclear. And as a result of that changes, the carbon emissions worldwide are declining. So one could take this apart, so to say, look at how much hydrogen, how much carbon and electricity reaches the consumers directly. And electricity is shown here in this green curve. It is growing rapidly. Carbon, in terms of hydrocarbons, the amount of carbon reaching the consumer is declining. And the hydrogen, shown in blue, it has been increasing and will presumably increase in the future. So I think this is a feature of the structural change and the evolution in the energy system and our societies, that we are tending toward electricity and hydrogen, and thus my expression, hydricity, as the future. Well, this just summarizes what has happened, so I think it's easier to understand. On the left side, you have the various end uses of our economy, services that our economy provides, for example, mobility through time. And on the right are energy sources from the beginning to today. So we went from, as I said, traditional energy to oil and gas. We went from horses and carriages to automobiles and trains and so on. And now mobility, of course, in the digital age is exploding. So what you can see is that the new energy sources, whether it's renewables, bioenergy, or nuclear, all of them would be reaching the consumer either in form of electricity and hydrogen, with a little exception of some of the heat that might be reaching the consumers directly. So this is a big structural change in the energy system. Now, that started quite a while ago, and almost 220 years ago, I have to stress that, was the first hydrogen car ever built in 1807. It was internal combustion engine, and on the right is the first true fuel cell hydrogen vehicle produced by GM in 1966. You can say that's laboratory level. And so it took well over half a century to see the first fuel cell cars powered by hydrogen offered commercially on the market. So it just shows how long the evolution is from the laboratory through early investments to the pervasive diffusion. And so the hydrogen has been on the scene for a very long time. Now, if we talk about the future of the hydrogen, I think it is important also to note that there is a very deep uncertainty about technological and social change in the world. And the first thing I would like to observe is the future characteristics, like costs of a new technology, let's say biohydrogen, will depend on our action in the future, how the research and development happens, how the investments and market introduction occurs. And so one of the major mechanisms is improvement of an accumulation of experience and knowledge that improves the technology in time. But this is not linear. Usually people think that R&D comes first and then investment and then commercialization. No, it's an interactive process with lots of feedbacks, nonlinear feedbacks, that does the complexity and uncertainty. So this is what we need to keep in mind if you think about the future. So let me share with you some of this, how the experience improves with technologies. Please note that here I'm showing a double log scale. On the vertical axis is the cost of an energy technology, dollars per kilowatt. On the horizontal scale is the applications. It's a cumulative increase in the market. So without spending too much time on the detail, most impressive is this yellow curve. I've highlighted it with the red line. This is the improvement of photovoltaic cells through increased investments worldwide, in particular production in China, the costs have gone down by 2 orders of magnitude. And it's very similar with the other technologies. So the one thing to keep in mind is that, at least in these cases, doubling of the global capacity of one of the energy technologies reduces the costs on the order of 20%. Now, you will probably ask, what is the exception here going up the scale? Well, that's nuclear in Japan and France, and I would say that's forgetting by not doing rather than learning by doing. And here's the same hypothetical experience or learning curves for hydrogen technologies from the Hydrogen Council. Again, costs on the vertical scale, cumulative deployment on the horizontal scale. And you can see this is about the same order of magnitude. They're anticipating cost increases of declines on the order of, let's say, 13 to 20% per doubling. So that's in the order of magnitude. And I hope that we will be investing in these new technologies, in particular biohydrogen, in order to achieve these improvements and make hydrogen together with electricity one of the major energy carriers. And why is that possible? I would like to offer to you the hypothesis that small-scale, granular-like technologies have much faster improvement or learning, technological learning, than the lumpy large ones. So on the vertical scale is, again, cost reductions in percent per doubling of the cumulative capacity that's shown or shipments that's shown on the horizontal scale, and the green lines indicate that the cost improvements on the order of about 20 to 30% for the small scale technologies listed on the right. But if we look at the larger scale technologies, then generally the learning is lower, and in some cases even extreme. It's negative in the sense that the costs increase in time. So this gives you, I think, an impression that hydrogen technologies from biological applications for bioenergy have at least a large improvement potential if we invest in them. And I think the reason why hydricity might be the solution is that both hydrogen and electricity can be produced from any source. So they're sustainable as long as the source is zero carbon and environmentally friendly. They can be interchangeably converted to each other. And as energy carriers, they're renewable. Basically, they don't require any additional resources. I think another factor that I would like to highlight that I think might empower this process is the digital age that's coming upon us, together with artificial intelligence and convergence of many digital technologies. I'm just trying to illustrate that here with a picture. On the top row, you have basically technologies that are moving our economy from ownership to usership. That means much higher efficiency, shared economy. The red ones are going more in that direction, where you have peer-to-peer services. And I think both hydrogen and electricity will be the central carriers for empowering this and for the digital machines themselves. And then on the bottom, you can see I think most importantly, our shift from atomized to connected, from individual to systemic, I would argue, services that would be reaching the consumer. Again, I think favoring zero emissions, flexible energy carriers like hydrogen and electricity. So let me give you a couple of examples why I think this is oncoming age. As you know, we could buy hydrogen cars and many hydrogen services today. About 1 to 2% of global energy is converted to hydrogen. Last Sunday was the 100 Le Mans 24-hour endurance race. And the reason why I'm mentioning this is they have decided that starting 2026, the car that you see in the picture that led the race cars this year will be hydrogen. And I think this is important because we have pervasive diffusion of electric cars, but they have a relatively limited range. And for races of this type, 24-hour race, you need an energy carrier that has high energy density and can be stored, and that's hydrogen. So favoring hydrogen. I think another one in context of digitalization, let me symbolically call this the hives of swarms of new technologies. They could be robots, they could be drones, they'll be interacting. I think they will generate new emergent properties. They will be self-navigating most likely, and already are. Many of those technologies that will require independent operation will need an energy carrier like hydrogen with zero emissions in combination with the fuel cell. And then the area that's most difficult to decarbonize is actually air travel, ships, and applications in remote areas. And I wanted to show you a design, a possible future design of a hydrogen aircraft that might be built around 2040, 2050. We don't have all of the technologies today to build such an aircraft. It would have photovoltaic cells, batteries to store energy. You see a turbofan at the back of the plane that would store energy on landing, and importantly would have hydrogen fuel cells for the electric power, in particular to reach the cruise altitude. And that's true for all of the electric plane designs that we have today. If they're long range, they will need additional energy source like hydrogen. So one of the questions, as I'm coming close to my 15-minute brief presentation, is this is how the energy system might look into the future. If you look at today, we are predominantly still fossil. So the effort is huge to become non-fossil in this scenario. And I think this is important for the hydricity age. Is efficiency and sufficiency should play a very high role, avoiding energy consumption. But what would be consumed in terms of energy sources, you can see toward the middle of the century, there might be mostly non-carbon biofuels, biomass, and including hydrogen and hydrogen from renewable energy sources. So the structural change might be ahead of us, and this is how this might look like if the world actually goes in that direction. And the good news is that would be consistent with stabilizing climate at 1.5 degrees without a huge overshoot of that target in the long run. So I would like to close with this slide, because I think sometimes pictures say more than graphics. You see 5 areas of services in our society: the trains, aircraft, communication system, individual mobility, and industrial processes. And I think you will agree with me that they have radically changed in periods of 50 years. So by 2050, we should expect exactly the same. And I think what is really important is the vertical, that the systems are connected. And this is why hydricity. And so here are a couple of examples of end-use technologies that would be hydrogen and electricity powered. Probably in many cases both, and hopefully such technologies will building a new system for a sustainable society into the future. So I will stop here. Thank you very much. There are 2 reports if anybody wants to look at it. One is from the European Science Advisory Process on the right about energy, and on the left report of trying to provide scientific basis for the 17 Sustainable Development Goals. Thank you very much. Nebojša, I will stop sharing the screen now.
Thank you, Nebojša. A very rich presentation. I hope there will be discussion on it. Let us move on. And I'm asking now Marcel to present his material. Marcel, please.
You're muted. Could you please unmute?
Please unmute yourself.
Is it okay now?
Yes, we can hear you. Yes, yes. Thank you.
Nebojša, do I give first my presentation, and we have the questions at the end, or do we have no questions after the lecture of our first colleague?
Okay, we shall do that afterwards. Let us first hear all presentations.
Okay. I'm also talking on the hydrogen technology roadmap for the future. And my first slide gives also a picture about what the present situation is about the climate change problems and all the dirty in the air. And we see a little bit about the countries like China is a special one. And then in the second slide, I just try to indicate already what I said with my colleague before. We should try and do everything in order to reduce the carbon into the air in the future. And I'm trying to demonstrate in this lecture that hydrogen may also be an important player, but I also will indicate a number of efforts are needed in order to become successful in the hydrogen field. The next one. The hydrogen technology roadmap, I think I would come back later on that one. The next one. Next slide. Now, maybe it is useful to indicate, I don't know that the presentation was not really like I presented it, but this slide tells you the following. In the production of hydrogen, there are now 7 different types of hydrogen. And there is only one type, that is the green hydrogen, that is the clean hydrogen. That is the clean hydrogen which the whole world is now trying to obtain. But in practice, it is more or less the dirty hydrogen, like number 2, not too dirty, number 3, more dirty, number 4, number 5, number 6, and number 7. There's only one, which is the clean hydrogen. And main industry and the main society is interested in that type of hydrogen, because if they start up with building plants like producing blue hydrogen or gray hydrogen or black, they will certainly have problems in the future from the authorities, as they will say, well, you cannot produce hydrogen which is so dirty. And number 2, 3, 4, and 5, they are dirty. And I will come back on number 1, which is produced by electrolysis, and all the others by different type of sources. And I think some of the next slides will demonstrate that. This slide tells you the following: the advantage of hydrogen. Hydrogen made from water in the electrolysis, that is the green hydrogen. You start with water, you split water in hydrogen and oxygen. Now, there is enough oxygen in the air, you don't have to store it, but the hydrogen have then to be stored. And once stored, you can use it again, hydrogen, together with oxygen, and produce again water. So you start with water, and you come back to water, and in the meantime, you produce a lot of energy for various type of applications. The next one. No, the next one. I think there are various ways in order to produce the hydrogen. You can do it by splitting water, and here, and the sun, very high temperature, to split water in hydrogen and oxygen with a lot of energy, high temperature. That could be a nuclear reactor, which had been demonstrated in the past in Jülich in Germany, where with the nuclear reactor that one could able to produce hydrogen by splitting water. But that is very high temperatures and very dirty intermediate chemicals which are used. Well, today it is not so practical anymore. And at the same time, it is one of the various 2 to 7 dirty type of hydrogen. Next time. Another type is to start from the biomass. also with pyrolysis. And then with pyrolysis, also a process which is known for a long time, you produce a gas that could be hydrogen, BioHydrogen or char. This process is also a process which has been used since quite a number of years. I was playing with that process even in the United States, in Colorado, maybe 20, 30 years ago. But I think it is still used, it will be used. It is an easy way, a relatively easy way to produce hydrogen, but it is not a hydrogen what the society in the future will need. But today it is very popular for many industrial applications. The next one. Now, this is just a type of the electrolysis. That is just a system in which you try. There are very many systems. Here I produce in principle 3 different systems, where an A, B, and C, and D, 4 different systems. But it is always the same. It is more or less that water comes in and you try to get on one side the oxygen and on the other side of the electrode the hydrogen. And you could weigh in the oxygen on the anode and the hydrogen on the cathode. And there are various types of systems which have been used in the past and today still very popular. And a lot of work and research is being done in order to find the cheapest system. That is the most important problem, the most critical problem in the electrolyzers. It is too expensive. And one is now trying to find anodes, cathodes, electrolytes, systems, all kinds of developments of new materials in order to get cheaper systems. But they are still today worldwide. Research is being done from China to America to India, all over the world. But it is still a very expensive system. And the progress is not the progress what we expect. We should go much further than what is actually going done. And I come back on what had to be done in future on this one. Next slide. So here are some of the reactions, but I think that will take my time and I will use my time for other applications. The next slide. Now, this one, I think, is quite an important system. In order to produce the facilities, practical facilities today, that is, you have on the left hand, on the left top, you have the sunshine, and in the middle, you have the wind. And with the sun and the wind, you're making electricity in a relatively cheap way. And with that electricity, you will try then, you don't really see it on the right-hand side with the fuel cell, or again with electrolyzers, you have then cheap electricity. You will try then to get hydrogen and oxygen by electrolyzers. And that system, I think, will be the system for the next 10 to 20 years to be used. Many people, like in Europe, but not only Europe, in China, and particularly in the Middle East, also in the United States, one is trying to develop these systems. I think it is number one worldwide to have the sun, cheap sun, and then also the wind. In Europe, one puts it on the North Sea and other seas in Europe, where there is hopefully enough sunshine. You have some problems in Europe, it is not always the nice weather. And then also the wind, also again on the seaside, to produce the electricity. There are now also very big negotiations between Germany, between many European countries, but also with the European Union to have a contract with the Middle East, because in the Middle East there is much more sun. And also there is a lot of wind, even more wind than what we have in the European area, in the Middle East countries, and Qatar and other ones. Oman is very, very popular in that one. And there are very big contracts made with Europe and these countries, and then to ship it from that hydrogen at the end by cargoes to Europe. Now, this is, I think, the most popular one. We can discuss that later on during the discussions, but that is, I think, the way to go. That is sun and wind to produce electricity, cheap electricity to split up via electrolyzers the water into hydrogen and oxygen. And this is the pure hydrogen, what we are producing. One of the big problems what we have is more or less a political type of problem. What has been discussed mainly on the level of the European Commission is that, well, we had a very bad experience with, well, a nice country, Russia, which a lot of energy in the petrol and gas came from Russia for Europe. But there was a certain problem that politically that one can cut some pipelines. And we have the same problem. What will happen if we are really putting all the freedom in the hands of the Middle East by the production of the hydrogen via the sun and the wind, and to transport it then to Europe? What will happen when there will be once a problem with Europe, a type of political problem, a war, or you can imagine all kinds of topics these days, that this will also be very critical. So there is the policy today is to make the contracts with these countries, and at the same time also to start a lot of pilot plants. And we have a number which are underway all over Europe. Next slide. Yeah, that is the same, but it is more or less in an industrial way how that is being done. Next one. Now, in my lecture, I had 3 parts. The first part is how to produce hydrogen. I've given a few examples of which type of hydrogen can be produced, what sources are being made, and at the same time also the clean hydrogen with electrolysis. Now, I should indicate that already in the beginning that hydrogen is a vector, is a high energy source, and this makes it much more complex. In my lecture, I have 3 parts. The first part is how to produce the hydrogen. The second part is to store the hydrogen. I think we have to store it. And this is one of the biggest problems. I think hydrogen, a lot is being done in order to produce it, to generate, to synthesize it. A lot of research is being done on that field. But the second point is how to store the hydrogen. And here this slide gives, there are various ways. You have the physical-based topic, that is with compressed gas or cold cryo systems and liquid hydrogen. That are ways which can be used, and for the time being, they are used and most practically used. But there is also a kind of the material-based hydrogen. That is to find materials which can absorb hydrogen very easily, and that hydrogen is absorbed very good so that it is not released. And at the same time, these materials should, when you use or when you need the hydrogen, the desorption should be very simple. And there are now enormous amount of programs and a lot of patents which are being made in this area. And I think the greatest effort, which today, particularly in Japan, also in European and all over the world, also China, all over the world, what they are doing is they are trying to find materials which just have the characteristics, try to absorb hydrogen in great quantities, that the hydrogen is good depth, but at the end, if you need it, that you can dissolve it in an easy way. And I think that is probably the future. All the others, the physical-based methods which we have today and which will certainly be used for the next years because of the absence of the other materials. I can tell you, I personally was involved in the materials-based at Max Planck Institutes in Germany, where an enormous amount of effort has been placed already 20 years ago. But the progress is still very limited. But the storage of hydrogen is, I think, the main problem for hydrogen in the future. The next one. Well, yeah, this, yeah, the next one that is that about the storage of hydrogen. You can see here, the storage of hydrogen should be done in on a way. So storage is, I think, is one of the main problems. I already said that in order to store it in the proper materials would be the best solution, but it would not be the easiest one. Let us take the next slide. This gives then a kind of a resume on the bottom part, that is the production of hydrogen by coal, natural gas, solar, etc. And then to produce electricity and to make the electrolyzers, or with a nuclear reactor, thermally of nuclear reactor. And on the bottom part, you find then all the type of the applications, what we have, what you can do with hydrogen. You can use it in the transport, what already was said by a colleague before. But still, I like to put the point that to use them in transport is a very minimum. You can really practically zero. This except for the NASA, where they put the satellites to the moon, or such kind of applications for sport cars, but that are exceptions. I myself played a lot with hydrogen at NASA, the first man on the moon. That is where I learned about hydrogen, and also at CERN in the bubble chambers, CERN in Geneva in Switzerland. But for the rest, in respect to the fuel cells, is still a big, great problem, but we really need it. And also the other ones for turbines, etc. It be very difficult. And the progress, if you look by turbines, by Rolls-Royce or by other kind of companies, MTU in Germany or in France, is extremely difficult. We miss the technology to do it. And I come back in a few minutes about all the problems, what we have with hydrogen, and what research and technology should be done in order to get the production cheaper, in order to store it better, and then also in respect to the transport, because we don't have a proper infrastructure. And the infrastructure which is available at present for the transport of other gases cannot be used by hydrogen. Hydrogen is too small and can penetrate very easily there where it should not go. The next slide.
Marcel, you should conclude, please. You should conclude.
Yeah, that are more or less all the hydrogen applications. Show still 2 or 3 slides, then I can cut to my end. So go to the next one. I think you can use it in many applications. The next one, like in the car, but very difficult, you know, to use it for cars. Next one then. Another one. That is for the transport, but it's a very primitive way. What I said, we should really try to get it in another way. The hydrogen should not be put into the liquid in a container or in another container. The next one. This is, I think, the solution for the future. I think it would be wise if we could have the hydrogen in the stations where we have now the petrol. And that is one of the future targets, what we should try to get, that is the hydrogen gas into the stations. And that is what the society wants. But therefore, we have an infrastructure which is not available. And that is a very complex type of structure in order to make the infrastructure. The next one. The next one. Next one. I think next one. I think I would like just to conclude by saying the following. One of the biggest problems, one of the big problems what we have, that's number one, that is the education. Hydrogen has not been educated during the last 50 years at technical universities, at universities. So we have not the engineers for the hydrogen available. That does not mean that there are some exceptions available, but in general, we don't have the education for hydrogen available. About the security on hydrogen, that is not available. About the standardization on hydrogen on an international scale is not available. International collaboration is really missing here completely. And once more, the education is a very complex type of problem. It is today that at various technical universities in Europe, that again courses on hydrogen are being given. And we don't have the engineers in order to build the so-called, we don't have the research available for the electrolyzers or for the production of hydrogen. We don't have the knowledge available for storage of hydrogen. So we are in a very primitive way. And in order to get a breakthrough, that may take many, many, many years. Now, the situation about hydrogen is very important, but I think today it is important and tomorrow the electricity is important. And I think the competition between electricity and hydrogen is still a very debate. And the politicians, a number of efforts are being made, but I think the efforts should be a factor 1,000 higher in order to get a great breakthrough in the hydrogen. And the industry in Europe is still very pessimistic, as we are today, like in the transport. My colleague before, he was saying in some lorries and in also in sport cars and also in vehicles to the moon, etc. But if you look about the airplanes and if you look about the cars, I think it is zero practically use. And we need a lot of research, fundamental research, applied research, and industrial applications in order to get the breakthrough in the hydrogen in Europe and in the world. Thank you.
Thank you, Marcel. We shall go on. The time is going on. Now I'm asking Richard to present his materials. Richard, please.
I'm sorry, I've lost my. Disappeared.
On the bottom.
Oh,
Can you click on share screen below?
I have now, I think.
Okay. You choose the application, the PowerPoint.
Moment. Okay, now, now
and then
everything is.
share.
Can you see it? Can you see?
No, we don't see it yet.
Okay. I'm not able to share screen.
Share
Okay.
screen. Choose the app.
Okay, just a moment. Share screen. I want to share this one. Is screen sharing?
Yes, but it is not full screen. Yeah, now we do see it.
You do see it, but I need to slideshow from beginning. Is now okay?
Yeah, now it is fine. Yes, please go ahead.
Now it is okay. Okay. Thank you very much. I'm delighted to have chance to talk with you about potential applications of Spirochaeta americana for biohydrogen production. The climate and energy crisis has stimulated the U.S. National Clean Hydrogen Strategy and Roadmap to stress the importance of developing zero and low carbon hydrogen to a sustainable and equitable clean energy future. The bipartisan infrastructure bill that was passed quite recently in the United States provided $9.5 billion for clean hydrogen development, and the recent Inflation Reduction Act provided additional incentives by way of production tax credits. Also, the 2021 Hydrogen Energy Earthshot was developed to stimulate private sector environments. These developments and stimulation from the World Academy of Art and Science led us to again reconsider the possible role of the haloalkylophilic Spirochaeta americana that was isolated from Mono Lake for the anaerobic fermentation of zero carbon biohydrogen. In 1939, Gaffon reported the discovery that molecular hydrogen could be released by water by photosynthetic activity of the green algae Synodesmus obliquus. In 1993, Taguchi reported the isolation of hydrogen-producing bacterium from termites. And in 2002, Siebert et al. Cloned and sequenced the hydrogenase genes HYDE-A1 and HYDE-A2 from the green algae Chlamydomonas reinhardti. Hydrogen from algae is high efficiency, but it can suffer from inhibition by oxygen produced during the photosynthetic process. In 2003, hydrogen was shown to be the primary end product of the fermentative metabolism of sugars by the novel anaerobe from Mono Lake, and NASA Marshall Space Flight Center funded research for studies of hydrogen production by Spirochaeta americana as potential for application to providing continual supply of hydrogen for fuel cells for the space station and for long duration space flights for human exploration of the moon and Mars. This all started at NASA in 1996 when David McKay reported evidence for nanofossils in the 3.2 billion year old meteorite from Mars. And in 1997, we established the astrobiology group at the NASA Marshall Space Flight Center to study microbial extremophiles and microfossils in carbonaceous meteorites in collaboration with Dr. McKay and his Center for Biomarkers in Astromaterials. This resulted in my expeditions to search for life in some of the Earth's most hostile environments. Studies of the permafrost of the Fox Tunnel of Alaska resulted in the discovery and description of a new bacterium, Carnobacterium pleistocinium, in Antarctica of Sanguibacter gelidus datuaria, and also in Antarctica underneath the ice of Lake Untersee of William Whitmania Terazaki. But the main thing was that we wanted to examine the possibility of searching for life on Mars. The most interesting possibility was to look for life in closed lake basins. In fact, images had revealed that there was actually water ice in Veristatissus borealis and in Korolev crater. So these volcanic impact craters on Mars contain frozen water ices. And as an analog of that, it was decided to look at endorheic basins on Earth, Owens Lake in California. Those studies resulted in the discovery of Spirochaeta dissipatotropha and Anaerovirgula multivorans. And in Mono Lake, 3 organisms, Spirochaeta americana, Tyndalia californiensis, and Disulfonatronum thiodismutans. Mono Lake is most interesting because it's an endorheic basin. In the center of Mono Lake, there's the volcanic Paoa Island with very hot 90 degrees Celsius sulfurous alkaline springs that emerged in Mono Lake about 350 years ago. This is the spectacular images of Mono Lake. It has these tufa columns of calcium oxide, calcium dioxide, and calcium carbonate hydrated. These are along the south shore. And on August 15th, 2000, I collected black mud samples from the south shore with strong hydrogen sulfide odor, anaerobically sampled under shallow water at temperature of 21.6 Celsius, salinity 7%, and pH 9.9. The primary producers of Mono Lake were studied by Kosielek and Herbst in 1992, and they showed that the dominant diatoms in Mono Lake were Navicula crucialis and some species of Nitzschia, such as the Nitzschia frustulum shown below. And on the right is a Navicula that was actually photographed just about a month ago at DTU Space in Copenhagen. One of the things that is most interesting about diatoms is, as was shown in the 1986 paper I published with the late Sir Fred Hoyle, that there is a protein template that directs the fabrication of these very complex shells out of a hydrated amorphous silica, and the polysaccharides include the structural carbohydrates include glucose, mannose, glucose, and xylose. This is very interesting from the standpoint of benthic diatoms in monolake. Also, a dominant form of life there are the picocyanobacteria, such as cyanobium and Synechococcus. In 2001 at NSSTC, Dr. Pikuta obtained enrichment cultures and isolated 3 novel strains, MLF1, which is an anaerobic alkylophilic magnetotactic sulfate-reducing heterotroph that is capable of growth on hydrogen without an organic source of carbon. ASPG1, Spirochaeta americana, is an obligate anaerobe haloalkylophile sugarlytic hydrogen-producing spirochete, and APO, Tendalia californiensis, is an obligate anaerobe extremely haloalkylophilic forming acetogen. These show the papers where these new species were described, and in the center where you see the images of, in the left, Spirochaeta americana, and you see the live dead stain. The green forms are alive and the red are dead. And just to the right of that, you can see the flagella that is actually typically confined within the periplasmic space. In this TEM image, you see where it has been released, so you can actually see the flagella. And next is Tendalia californiensis, and the right to sulfonatronium thiodismutans and the phylogenetic trees shown below. This is an image showing a video showing the motility of Spirochaeta americana. Very, very beautiful, very tiny, thin, but long microorganism. After Dr. Pikuta had obtained enrichment cultures, it was possible to not only study the locomotion and motility, but she was also able to do precise characterization of all of the microbiological features of this unique organism. This shows Spirochaeta americana, number 3, compared with other spirochetes. And the most important thing that I want to point out is you see in bold that Spirochaeta americana produces hydrogen. The main reason that these various studies were performed were to find out how much hydrogen it produced in comparison with other spirochetes, as it's shown in this table, free-living spirochetes. And it turns out that Spirochaeta americana is significantly greater producer of hydrogen than all of these other very interesting microorganisms. In 2016, Spirochaeta americana was reclassified into the new genus Alcalospirochaeta. And in this phylogenetic tree, you can see at the top Alcalospirochaeta cellulosivorans, which is the type species for this new genus. And the interesting thing is cellulosivorans is actually able to consume cellulose, and it was isolated from the gut of a wood-eating cockroach, Cryptoceras punctilitis, and therefore that was formed the basis of this new genus. In conclusion, the heat value of hydrogen is the order of 2.7 times that of petroleum fuels. The main hydrogen production method today is by steam reforming of fossil fuels, but the contribution to climate change is non-sustainable. In fact, it is not a clean mechanism for producing hydrogen. It is thought that clean hydrogen can be produced from microorganisms such as Spirochaeta americana by fermentation of sugars. Further research is absolutely necessary to investigate how one may obtain low-cost feedstocks essential sugars from alkylophilic benthic diatoms, picocyanobacteria, or carbonate-rich carbohydrate-rich organic waste. And it is important to determine the new technologies that can be obtained in order to make this possible on industrial levels. And with that, I thank you very much for the opportunity to present this to the World Academy of Art and Science. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Richard. A lot of information, and you were also not pretty long. Thus, I'm asking Elena now to present materials. Please, Elena.
Yes, I'm here.
Yes, just a
for
moment
My presentation.
to find how to get to hers. Just a moment.
Not this one. No, not this one.
Yes, this is it.
No, it's not. It should be in gold.
Elena.
I mean, oh, it's not this. It's not this version. No. It's white. Close it. You can go back to this and find it here. Yeah.
No. Yes, this is it. Okay, are we sharing?
We don't see it yet. Can you please click on share screen?
Yeah.
Choose the presentation file. Yeah, now it is being shared. Yes.
All right. So by hydrogen production. On the website of Energy Department, it says that hydrogen can store and deliver clean energy for many uses across economic sectors, including transportations. It has the potential to reduce air pollution, such as greenhouse gases from trucks, buses, planes, and ships. Greenhouse gases trap heat and contribute to climate change. The transportation sector is responsible for 29% of this emission. So on the website airbus.com innovation, you can find all kinds of news promising planned commercial flights that fly entirely on hydrogen for 2024. Also for Airbuses, hydrogen is promising decarbonization technologies for aviation. That's also described there. And plans to bring a low carbon commercial aircraft to market by 2035. So if compare with gasoline, energy in 1 kilogram of hydrogen, it's equal to energy in 1 gallon of gasoline. And 1 kilogram of hydrogen could allow to ride 60 miles compared with gasoline, 1 gallon, 25 miles. So to start talking about bacterial hydrogen productions, I should say that all living organisms on Earth divided on two groups. First group, producers of organic matter, and second, decomposers of organic matter. So what we will talk today about bacterial hydrogen productions, it's a second group, decomposers of organic matter. Even so, we know that photosynthesis, photolysis of water also could create hydrogen, but it's producing explosive mixture of hydrogen with oxygen, which is highly combustive, very dangerous mixture. So we will talk about fermentations today. So fermentations in the microbial world divided on saccharolytic and proteolytic bacteria. So in anaerobic ecosystems, following groups of lithotrophic microorganisms, lithotrophics, it's mean not organic eating, but using hydrogens and other inorganic compounds for food. So this organism competing for hydrogen. So sulfate-reducing bacteria, acetogenic bacteria, and methanogenic archaea. So enzymes of these microorganisms have a very high affinity for hydrogen molecules. So in nature, hydrogen producers tightly associated with hydrogen-consuming bacteria. Both the producers and consumers of hydrogens equipped with special enzymes, hydrogenases, which located in periplasmic space of gram-negative bacteria. It's membrane-bound hydrogenases. Some of them could be soluble. And third group, regulatory hydrogenases. For industry, gram-negative bacteria are preferable since no spore formations occurs during continuing batch cultivations. So the process cannot be stopped. And the Sparaquita americana, or alkali sparaquita, was isolated from alkaline monolake, like Richard was showing previously. And this is free living. Free living, it's mean not pathogenic spirochetes, required for growth buffer system with pH 9, 10, and marine salinity, seawater salinity. So this water could be used, these solutions could be used for sterilizations of wound, because it's very aggressive media. So no pathogens will survive in this soapy saline water. So it was isolated as a satellite of the hydrogen-consuming sulfate-reducing bacteria. So it was a side product of our investigation. So we were not targeting this organism. We were hunting the sulfonatronum thioreducens, which is a lithotrophic sulfate reducer. And it was shown that in vitro, this bacteria, Sparaquita and this desulfonatronum thioreducens species grow better in binary culture, since sulfate-reducing bacteria removes inhibiting concentrations of hydrogen for sugar-lytic spirochete. So they were good to each other. Both these bacteria are gram-negative, not spore-forming, with wide periplasmic space within cell wall, and comparison of these hydrogenases of both of these organisms may show tremendous similarities. Also, comparison of genes responsible for these enzymes correspondingly may demonstrate the gene transfer. So on later picture, I will show how look this sulfate reducers. You will see peels surrounding surface of the cells, and they could be responsible for gene transfer processes. Some hydrogenases have reversible functions of uptake and release hydrogen molecules, but others have restricted one-direction functions. So what this hydrogen-producing bacteria was using for food. So it was taking sugars from algae, photosynthetic alkalophilic cyanobacteria, and diatoms, producers of organic matter of this lake. On the left side, you could see a list of the sugars that were described in the original article for species descriptions, and second column, it's additional sugars that were checked already for biohydrogen productions project. So all sugars supporting growth of this spirochete. So grown biomass of these producers of organic matter in ecosystem is degraded at soapy, highly mineralized carbonated water solutions where temperature may reach 55 degrees C in summertime. Products of dissipated algal biomass serve as a growth substrates for primary and secondary anaerobes in the trophic chain of the biome. Enzyme activity of protein sugarlytic bacteria accelerates the bioremediations and recycling organic matter in the system. Final products of fermentations, hydrogen, CO2, CO, and volatile fatty acids are used as donors of electron in metabolism of lithotrophic bacteria and archaea. So qualitative measurements were performed for characterizations of species, and it was found on gas chromatographs that only 2 gases were produced during growth of this unique spirochete. So CO2 and hydrogen, this is a 29 hours incubations of strains on D-fructose. So in 44 hours incubations, we have to switch off sensitivity of the measurements because it was increased tremendously, and hydrogen and CO2 also increased. So then we checked all list of sugars available in laboratory and find out what's the highest productions of hydrogen on which sugar. And it was shown that D-glucose definitely demonstrated highest productions of hydrogen. And the lowest was found on a starch. This is all parameters of the measurements which were described in the original article and methods and techniques. And that peaks on the left side, you could see the standard, which is 100% hydrogen. Actually, it was 80% of hydrogen because it was mixture CO2 plus hydrogen for standard. And then the same volume of the sample from gas phase of the Spirochete americana, and you could see that it's very high, 57%, so it's probably around 70. Also, we measured for balance consumptions of sugars. So this is methods for also described in the original article, and it was shown, calculated that on 1 mole glucose, 4 mole of hydrogen were produced. So its measurements was 5.5 millimole, and it's produced 20 millimole of hydrogen, which is proportions 1 to 4. So this is the working proportion. Conclusions on this study at the astrobiology lab was made that bioproductions of hydrogen could be safely performed at big scale batch cultivations. Anaerobic exit of hydrogen and CO2 is safe, not explosive gas mixture. Applied growth medium inhibits development of pathogenic contaminations as well as competitive for hydrogen methanogenic archaea. The best yield of hydrogen was observed on D-glucose and D-fructose, and the batch cultivation demonstrated correlations between optic density along with cell number count and hydrogen gas produced. So this could be used for future estimation of the process. And these results were presented in 2004 at the astrobiology meeting at SPIE in Denver. And this is our photograph in newspaper Marshall Star, where the article on first page was dedicated to biohydrogen productions at Marshall Space Flight Center. So next portions of information I want to give you about hydrogenases. So hydrogenase is the key enzyme of catabolism in cell, and it catalyzes converse reactions of hydrogen oxidation. Hydrogens equal 2 protons and 2 electrons. So this enzyme responsible for consumption and excretions of hydrogen. These enzymes were found in prokaryotes, including aerobes, facultative anaerobes, phototropes, and obligate anaerobes, which is methanogenic, acetogenic, nitrogen-fixing, and sulfate-reducing bacteria, and archaea. Also, these enzymes were found in eukaryotes, such as algae, protozoa, and higher plants. They may consume hydrogen as energy source or as electron sink. Independence upon metal in active center, these enzymes are classified on ferrum-ferrum, nickel-ferrum, nickel-ferrum-selenium, and metal-free hydrogenases. So we studied hydrogenases at on the desulfonatron thiodismutans, which is a chemolytic sulfate-reducing bacteria capable of growth on hydrogen plus CO2 by reductions of sulfate to hydrogen sulfide. This organism also capable to perform reaction dismutations. That's why it's named desulfonatron thiodismutans. So dismutations or inorganic fermentation. So the only end catabolic product at growth on formate or hydrogen with sulfate reductions is hydrogen sulfide. All these features explain high activity of hydrogenase and its resistance to high pH and salinity. So this is morphology of this sulfur reducer. On the left side is gram stain, typical red coloration. And on the right side, it's transmission electron microscopy image. You could see polar flagellations from both sides. I think it's dividing vibrion. And as I promised to show you tiny hair-like filaments surrounding entire surface of this vibrion. It's just surrounded. So it's mean this bacteria could transfer part of genomes of genes responsible even also for hydrogenases and request conjugating organism to produce more hydrogen for food of this organism. So that's how it's related and connected to Spirochaeta americana. So they are like binary culture, behaving like collaborators. So physiological optima and ranges of this organism shown on the right side was significantly actually narrower and smaller than functional enzyme on the left. So you could see that sodium chloride optima, it's twice higher. This is in molar concentration. This is in percent. So 1 molar 1-2 is approximately 612% sodium chloride. And also was investigated dependence of hydrogenase upon bicarbonate, and it was found that it's only tolerated, not required for growth. pH optima approximately exactly the same, but the ranges of the enzymes are higher. So high activity of hydrogen oxidizing hydrogenase of this organism indicates the enzyme perform catabolic functions by participations in discriminatory fat reductions. And hydrogenase is able to function at high pH and high concentrations of sodium chloride. All these features suggest that enzyme is a unique subject for diverse biochemical research and define the potentials for biotechnological application. What I did? I did something wrong. Do you see me?
Just
now?
yes, just click on from current slide. Good.
Just click. How to?
From the top.
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay, let me just find it quickly. Yes, let me find it. It's a little bit slow. Okay. Almost finished. So this is conclusions. So this results of study of hydrogenase also was presented on the conference 2004 astrobiology. And first author was Dr. Ditkova from Institute of Microbiology, Russian Academy of Science. And Richard and I, we were in the co-authors. So future development and bacterial hydrogen productions. It's of course genome study, genes associated with hydrogenases to determine if hydrogen productions can be improved, measurements of enzyme activity of hydrogenases for increasing yield of hydrogen, and work with engineering and gas equipment development for continuing and batch cultivations on big scale industry. And material science, of course, may develop a novel sponge-like materials for absorptions and storage of hydrogen in small portions with consequent slow release for engine safe, not explosive technology. And also a few words about sequencing. So Department of Energy Joint Genome Institute performed draft sequencing on the number for Alkalis Parakeet americana. And the dismutants, it was actually sequenced earlier. So, and this is example of genes number for hydrogen dehydrogenase, which need to be studied and compared. And we would like express in acknowledgement, we would like express our deepest gratitude to Russian Academy of Science, particularly to Dr. Zhilina for suggested chapter in my PhD dissertations, without which this work could not be performed. Also, thanks to NASA, Marshall Space Flight Center, and National Space Science Technology Center facilities and administrative work for funding this research, support, and interest to our work. And also special thanks for WAAS for today's meeting, an opportunity to present and discuss potential applications for this research. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Elena. We have 10 minutes only for discussion, and I'm giving a chance. The first question should be put by Gary Jacobs, who has been following the whole session. He is the president and CEO of the World Academy of Art and Science. Gary, I hope you are present. I know that you have a question for Elena. Please put it.
Gary. Gary.
Thank you. Actually, I had questions for all of the very interesting speakers. And also my thanks to you, Nebojša, for organizing this very interesting program of speakers. I was trying to, well, I have put questions in the chat for all of you, but the last one, which I did direct to Elena, was you mentioned that the anaerobic process for generating the hydrogen was also generating CO2. And it just occurred to me, since our concern is a fuel that's producing energy without complicating our problems with CO2, whether that's a significant relationship or not.
The problem is that CO2 will be totally absorbed by bicarbonate system. So it will be held inside of the liquid media. So it will be very easy to separate and put it back to carbonates. So mineralize, we can mineralize it immediately. So it's really, really, really good. It's very nice. Yeah, and percent of CO2, like 5-10 times less than hydrogen. So this amazing bacteria. When you're growing bacteria, you can shake it on second day and you will see bubbling like champagne, little bubbles, because it's hydrogen. CO2 immediately dissolved in a buffer, high pH buffer system, so it will never go on top. So,
and have there been, I'm misusing my privilege of going first, but have there been efforts to project commercial feasibility of using this on a large scale?
For the commercial scale estimations, it's need to be done a lot of work. So what was done, it's basically batch cultivation, which is well sealed, and because with all this continuing, we need special engineering, all these tubes, all these connections, because it will be hydrogen will escape all silicon tubes, all, I don't know, connections need to be done, and it's very dangerous. University didn't allow me to perform work in my laboratory, so it should be special facility.
I would like to add something also. At the time this was done, in 2003, 2004 time period, electricity and fossil fuels were much cheaper. And of course, the concern over climate change was not nearly as acute as it is today. We moved on to studies of other microorganisms collected from other expeditions, and but actually, we had not thought about this until Nebojsa invited us to participate in this wonderful program. And after being, again, thinking about it, we realized that the world has changed dramatically since 2003, 2004 time period. And we're very much hoping that we can develop collaborations where there are people that know far more about the techniques for storage and large-scale production than we do. Engineers that are extremely knowledgeable about massive fermentation facilities and so forth. So that's what we're hoping can come out of this, is that we can actually begin to formally find a position in a laboratory where we can continue this research to hopefully bring this to where it can become economically feasible.
Wonderful. Well, between all our speakers, maybe we have the expertise we need for that work.
I also would like to add that since 2004, when we reported this data, no much changes in the diversity of candidates for the hydrogen productions. The most candidates were pathogenic Clostridia, Klebsiella, which is no good on big scale. You can imagine, in giant tank to grow these pathogens. It's very dangerous. So this bacteria are really, really safe. And even if it will be put it on a wound, open wound, nothing will happen. It will still heal your tissues. So from this point of view, it's very promising.
Thank you very much. Thank you all.
Very much. We are almost at the end of the event. Now I'm asking Nebojsa, I know that he has a question, and please put it and decide who would you like to answer.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, just to avoid the ambiguity, maybe you can call me Naki, and then we know who of us is asked to speak. I found this really, really exciting presentations, actually all three, and I would have now, after Gary's question, would like to follow up in the same vein. The world is very late in reducing the carbon emissions, and in fact we are going to have an overshoot. So many of the studies about how to stabilize climate indicate that we need net negative emissions in the future. And Elena has pointed out that I think the bacterial source of hydrogen in the research that you're working might be suitable for that, if I understood correctly, because cellulose would be, let's say, biological origin, would have carbon, and if you're separating CO2 after producing hydrogen with bacteria, CO2 could be stored. And that would be actually the same question to Marcel, because I think all of the other biosources could do the same in principle. So I just wonder whether you have brief answers to that or comments.
Somebody was asking question about how do you imagine of this technology. So we discussed it with Richard and came to conclusion. So it should be like two giant tanks. First tank will be with biomass of photosynthetics, which required light, so it could be on surface, and underground could be giant tank for the Sparaquita americana, which will already producing hydrogen. So this is requirements of 2 separate tanks, aquariums.
Yeah, and that would be in principle scalable, I assume.
Yeah, so photosynthetic will be degraded partially, then filtrated, and then already saved, purified glucose or whatever sugars. Maybe we'll discover some new types of sugars, and spirochetes will use it.
Also, other scientists in several places are looking at the nanoporous aspects of diatoms for storage of hydrogen, which is a completely different kind of approach where there's nanotechnology being applied to this very important problem.
Okay, Marcel, we have a few more minutes. Would you like to put a question or to give a comment on all what we have heard? Please, Marcel.
Negosha, it was quite interesting to listen. In respect to what is bio and everything related to that, what Elena and I personally was involved in 2003 and 4 in Denver and in Colorado in the United States, by programs which has been supported by the NASA and also programs where the European Space Agency had an interest in it. I am just wondering how long will that still take when that project becomes a reality in the society? That's one of my big questions. I also saw at the Department of DOE and the new program in the United States that they are not spending too much money on that one. I think that should be much more encouraged, that much more universities and research centers from the DOE are much more involved in that one. We in Europe, we have still that fundamental research going on in Max Planck institutes. And I would strongly encourage you to take contact with 3 Max Planck institutes in Berlin, in Heidelberg, and also in Cologne. We are doing still work, similar fields. But to my field, it is still in the fundamental research. It is very difficult to get a takeoff in that. In respect to the topic about what Nekasha was mentioning, I think you are well placed in respect to the analysis for the future. But you have not said in your speech, when will there be a breakthrough into the hydrogen? You are mentioning that energy is popular in transport cars, in NASA, in such kind of also the Iran vehicles that Russia is sending to Ukraine is also on that level with nanotechnology. But the point is, how do you see, when will it come? I personally, from the knowledge I have in that field, I've even written 3 books recently on hydrogen process synthesis, hydrogen storage, and also hydrogen into the applications. And also there are a number of chapters on the bio in it and also in the future orientations. I personally think that what I presented about the solar plus the wind to produce cheap electricity, and from that one to split water into hydrogen and oxygen, that is the future. There was also in WAAS a big event which they participated in Las Vegas, if I remember well. They can only use that type of hydrogen. They cannot use all hydrogen. They can only use the pure hydrogen in the whole semi and electronic industry. Is only the pure. All the other processes, they contain too much carbon, as if they make from coal or hydrocarbons, and you transfer it into hydrogen following their processes, they are containing so much carbon, which will produce CO2 and everything. So it will be very difficult in the new regulations in the future worldwide that these processes can be used. These companies who are producing this from all carbon-oriented systems to get hydrogen, they will have big problems in future as the regulations will be stricter and stricter. Therefore, the whole world is today looking into the electrolyzers. But the electrolyzers is a big problem. That is too expensive. And the whole world is principally also looking into systems and in materials and in electrolytes in order to get cheaper systems. But that is the only way where we have to go. And for the production of hydrogen. And the storage of hydrogen is also a very big problem. I think it is not the best way, is not by pipelines. And we don't have the infrastructure, and the pipelines there cannot be used because the hydrogen go through it. So we have new pipelines that is taken enormous effort. And to get by ships to transport it like the oil is transported today, I think it's not a way. We have to find out systems in order that we can store the hydrogen in a proper way. And here also an enormous amount of effort all over the world is being put into that system. And I think and I hope that following the forecast of the International Energy Agency in Paris, that we can get the stations which I presented, that we can have by car, that we can get and fuel at stations where no petrol is taken, that we can get the hydrogen from the stations. That's what I hope, but it is very optimistic. And the hydrogen goal, I think personally, is very important. I'm personally interested, and I would really encourage that about the topic which you have been presenting, about the bio and the fermentation and so on, that there is much more money. I think we need a lot of money for the processes we are being developed, but for that one, we should encourage the whole world in do much more work, but there's not much going on. Japan stopped that program. The United States, not much being done on it. And China is not doing anything on this kind of thing, by my knowledge and by their statements. So I think we should for hydrogen, and I think that is the point to Boscha once more. You're sitting there in Austria in an institute where we're not only doing forecast. I think it would be very useful to come out once with a very good plan, but also with a budget plan, and also with the education, because we don't have the engineers today available in order to build the pilot plants. And we don't know what are the safety criteria, because hydrogen and oxygen is really explosive and it's like a kind of hydrogen bombs, like atomic bombs. And we have not this point under over control. So there is still a lot of fundamental research needed, applied research in order to come to the hydrogen. But I think one should put the effort in it in order that hydrogen get a good place for the time being in Europe, in the car and under industry is only 1% of the total. And that is not enormous. And in order to get from 1% to 50% or to 80% or 90% is a long way still to go. And it is the research and technology we have to bring the offers, as the politicians and governments are waiting for this information.
Okay, Marcel.
WAAS should really put a present of a document together and to present it to the governments.
Thank you very much, Marcel. We are at the end of the meeting. I would like to thank to the speakers, first of all, very much. It was rich, very rich.
Yes, it was.
Michelle, we have the presentations. We will collect the presentations and put them on the WAAS website. I have some of them, but we'll be in touch to exchange that. And Gary has also already mentioned that we will put the presentations on the website. I'm also thanking Gary because of his presence and questions and interest. We'll see how to continue. In any case, webinars on science for human security is continuing.
Wonderful.
We shall move to other topics, and you will definitely be invited to participate and learn as we have been learning today. We who are not specialists, who are not in the field. Once again, thank you very much and goodbye.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very
Thank
much.
you very much to World Academy of Arts and Science. Thank you.
Wonderful.
Yeah,
Bye.
thank you.
Thank you, Gary.
Well done.
Marcel, thank you. And Naki.